are areas that I couldn't speak to a woman about. There will always be things that women won't tell you. There'll always be things that men won't tell you, but it doesn't stop me interviewing them. I've interviewed a lot of women who have been very frank and honest with me in their opinions. That's the nature of oral history. I'm from Port Glasgow. Went to school here and left school and went to work in the shipyards in Port Glasgow. When I came to think about doing oral history first, the motivation was the shipyards. That was the area that I knew. The people that I had conjured up in my head intending to interview for the research were people that I knew through the shipyards or through the trade union movement in the area. But once I had actually started doing oral history, I became very much attracted towards women's issues in the community, because they were the sort of unsung heroes of the whole place, really. They, in my opinion, were, to a large extent, the community. They were underground, but they held the whole thing together.
It was a hard life, very hard life. I wouldn't like to think my young ones was going into the same. I mean to say, the young ones nowadays couldn't take that again. They could never take that. No. Never.
People were quite happy. Didn't know any better. I wouldn't go back to it.
Did you not?
Oh no. I'm better off now.
I didn't have any intentions of going on to further education. I was quite looking forward to going to work in the shipyards. My father had worked in the shipyards, my grandfather had worked in the shipyards, many of my relations and so on had worked in the shipyards. It was almost a natural thing to do, you know. This is where I started as an apprentice, Lamment's Yard. Like most others in Greenock and Port Glasgow, it's vanished. In 1984, I was facing my second redundancy from the yards, but I had an opportunity to go on to Ruskin College, the Trade Union and Labour College in Oxford, and then on to Edinburgh University.
He hasn't really changed much. He's still happy-go-lucky, Hugh, you know. But I'm glad that he went to college. Because there's nothing here, you know, there's no work. There isn't much else to do now, you know. So it would be either that or on the brew.
Many of the aspects of history that I had looked at in Ruskin and in Edinburgh were really about the sort of people that I knew. I kept seeing my own community. How much a change is it, Josie, coming to from where you did, in the housing in the town?
Oh, it's a big change here.
To a house like this?
Oh, aye. I mean, there were no houses up here at the time. Just all fields and farms.
Right.
It's all changed different now.
This is my auntie, Josie Watson, one of the people I've interviewed for my research. Josie was only 16 when her mother died, leaving her to be a full-time housekeeper to her father and brothers.
Well, I was doing everything then, and everything in the housework, you know, and making the food, doing the washing, and, you know, everything.
How did you cope?
I don't know. Because it was hard work in the days. You had no hoovers, no washing machines, and you had to go down to the back green to the wash house, fill up the boiler and light the fire, and then go down and scrub the clothes and oil them, and it was hard work.
Did you think it was a better deal you had when you were married? Looking after your husband and your wains rather than looking after...
Well, unfortunately, I still had my father and my brothers. So I was from Glasgow Road into John Wood Street nearly every day, doing their housework, make their food, and then back out in my own house and do my own. It was
So you were basically running two households
It was
then?
hard work. Ended up no well with it right enough, but
What happened to you?
I took TB, and I was a year in the hospital then. The kids were a year up in Courier Homes in Bridge of Beer.
Not bad. Yourself, Margaret?
Very well, thank you.
It's good to see you again. The oral history process allows you to indulge in your own history and shine a light on areas of history that really had never been looked at before.
You start.
What do you mean, don't start? What do you do with yourself in here?
What do we do before?
Aye.
Talk about everybody.
Talk about the ones that don't turn up. I'm looking at the theory of community. The word community spells out a sense of oneness, a wholeness. You know, it's a very nice word. People use it all the time to talk about community centres and all sorts of things dealing with community. But really, communities like this, like Port Glasgow and Greenock, an industrial shipbuilding and engineering community, was not a nice place. It was not the sort of place that people came for their holidays. It was not that type of perhaps rosy-cheeked image that the word community throws up. I think the nature of the area produces the people that live in it, you know. It produced a lot of tough people, men and women. Are you winning? Who's winning?
Everybody.
Was it a socialist card school? Everybody wins.
Everybody wins. You're too fly.
I thought you were my girl.
Nosy. Oh no, I've switched my allegiance.
Aye, typical.
I've switched it.
A game of cards and you're anybody's.
Aye, I know. That's instead of a fish supper, you. My father and mother arrived in 1912 into Port Glasgow. My father had been labouring to the miners by Hamilton. That's a job he done. But when he came to Port Glasgow, he was only a year here, and then he had a touch of kidney trouble, and he died in 1913.
Right.
They came in 1912, and my father died in 1913. It was easier, I think, to get a house then than what it is now. It was quite a nice building, and at that time, the way it was so good a building was that there were a toilet inside the house, a thing that wasn't in the middle of the town, because the middle of the town was a warren of lanes, and people, if they'd a house, maybe went downstairs to a toilet.
But I didn't know at that time where the toilet was going to be.
Where was it?
It was in 26 John Street, and my house was in 9 St Lawn Street.
So your toilet was a different street altogether?
My toilet was round the corner. You went round the corner, went in a close, and you went over the back, and you opened the toilet door, and then you went up to your back window, and you took the pail out the back window, and you emptied it, and then back to pail back, empty pail back again.
What was this for? What was the pail for?
For taking all the slops. You couldn't have had a toilet in the house, so you had to use a pail or something. There were babies in it.
I'm the oldest of 10 in a family.
And where did you all sleep?
3 and 4 in the bed. That's the street where I was brought up. There were 3 closes in it. And in them closes, there were 30 families. When I say families, I mean about 9 and 10 each. So you know what it was like.
Aye.
It was a small town on its own, the one street. Thousands. And it must have been.
And how did you manage with all those folk up with one close?
What, you know what I mean? You never hardly seen around. They were all friendly. A lot of poverty. But poverty brings people together.
For Andy getting washed, oh, this was a tear, and my brother used to kid Katie on. She would say, are you going up to Glasgow, are you going out with your mate? No, Katie, I'll no go. I'll go on. Away you go, Tommy, away you go. You know how that was? She wanted him to out so that she would get into that scullery and give herself a bath whenever everybody was out. See, that was the idea.
Aye.
Get whatever mail,
the men out
get
the
the men, get whatever the mail out to go, and then folk could give herself a bath. And it was a big, the old-fashioned tin bath that was in the thing.
Aye.
And you had to fill it, and then whenever you were done, it had to be lifted. Oh, the talk about the good old days. Who's kidding Hugh? Who's kidding who?
Aye, aye.
They had nothing to give away, but what they had, they would have shared.
Was this mostly the woman up the close that
The
would have...
women I'm talking about.
Did the men really lead a separate lifestyle from the women?
Really, they did. Men didn't look after the children, they didn't do anything when you go out to work.
Mm.
Didn't do nothing in the house, most of them. And the men were all heavy drinkers in them days.
One of my little fellas, one of my twins died because it was poor conditions. He died in the hospital. But then
What did he die of?
he died cutting teeth, but he took pneumonia, cutting teeth, and he lived, he was a year and a quarter, and he was a lovely boy.
Mm.
And he was one of between the twins, one was that sickly, another wee one, this wee one was full of fun and everything, died. And they put on that thing to keep him living, you know. But
Aye.
they cut it off. My brother went up and took his place, and he helped me to go home and have a wee lie down because I'd been sitting with him.
Right.
So he came up about an hour later and he says, I'm afraid the baby's away.
The tradition, whether it's real or not, the tradition in industrial areas is that it's a man's town, it's a man's area. The women look after the household, the women bear the children, they raise the children, they do all that sort of thing. The men worked and the women didn't. That was the general opinion. And that from that, a whole lot of opinions and traditions developed. But it wasn't quite true, because women did work. They worked in mills, they worked in shops, they worked all over the place. Did your mother work?
Well, she couldn't work, she's too many of her family, but she took odd jobs, you know, out in the country. She could do farm work. Every harvest time, all the women went out and worked the potato fields.
How would that be?
I went for 2 days,
Did you?
and they broke my back.
It was quite common for women to go and work in the farms.
Aye. Mostly all married women.
And why would they do this? Just
Well, when I get married, you get your calves out the mill. You didn't get working on. So
you needed to get something.
I had to get something to do, because the wages were very small. And they got boiling the potatoes home with them. A wee bag of potatoes home and 3 shillings a day. That's like 15 pence now.
Aye.
Terrible, isn't it?
Were they allowed to take these totties home with them?
Well, they took them anyway. I don't know if they're allowed or no, they took them anyway.
What did your man work at?
He was a holder on to the rivers. When you're a riveting squad.
Aye.
Aye. Hard work.
Was it? Was it regular work?
No, it wasn't really. That's how I had to work. They got a job at the riveting. In the riveting squad, there are 4 men. And usually it's families, brothers working together, and father and son and that. And maybe the job would last maybe 5 or 6 weeks. They get paid off. And maybe it'd be 3 or 4 weeks before they get another job. I never had a constant pay.
No.
The teacher said it's a shame taking a child out of school, he says, with her abilities. But my mother says, she says the brothers aren't working and the father's not working. And there's a job for her up in the mill.
It was a skilled job. In fact, it was so skilled that an awful lot of people thought you were very lucky to get into the weaving. You know what I mean? Because it was skilled. And another thing, some of the girls in the other side of the mill used to say, see them weavers? They all think they are something. You mean, kind of stuck up.
I was a spinner, finished up a spinner.
Was it a heavy job?
Well, it wasn't heavy, but you couldn't hardly get drawing your breath.
Why?
You kept that busy. Because these machines were that quick, that they were heating up that much. They had to keep oiling them all the time. Most of the girls had these that, as they call it, dermatitis now.
Mm-hmm.
We called it plooks name days.
Say ended at 2 looms and they made money. It made over £2. Well, there was so much £2 for each loom because they had 2 looms, because it would give them a big pay. You follow what I mean?
So the company would take money off you?
Aye, the company took money. That's true. That's no lie. They took so much off you.
I couldn't work when the boys were small, and then my mother looked after them and let me go out to work again. And I worked for another 2 years in the mill. And after that, I worked in the goods station during the war. I did a man's job. Hard work.
Do you think it was harder for a woman than it was for a man?
Well, where it came to keeping the house, it was harder for a woman. But they didn't understand us.
How?
Well, for the simple reason we weren't getting what we should have been getting. We were only getting a certain amount of brew money, which wasn't much to keep the house. So we had to fight to get them into Parliament, to get something done. But they were disappointed when they did get in. But still we kept on Labour. We never changed our product.
And you actually became secretary of
I
that
was secretary of the Second
branch.
World Labour Party.
Was that unusual for a woman?
No, of course not.
Was it not?
No, because it was among the Women's Party, women, it was most of the Labour Party.
Why was that?
Maybe they had a better amount of brains of what the men had. I don't know, but that was what happened.
Yeah.
People had to fight for what they believed in, had to fight to get things which were rights, and they should have had without having to fight for them. The women in Lee Jeans were there for 7 months, sitting in the factory, on a principle. People are backed into a corner and they've got no option to do what they need to do at the time. So the women in this area, as much as the men, have been put in that position as well. Some of the women that I've interviewed who worked in the mill looked at the Lee Jeans women and thought, I wish to God we had done that 50 years ago. Those people blazed a trail for a lot of women in this area.
My redundancy payment's just over £1,000. Would you sell your job for £1,000?
Well, in 1981 we were waiting in a pay rise, and I was taken in, told that there'd be no pay rise, that we were all getting made redundant. And when I asked why, they says that there weren't enough orders to get around it. They were closing the Greenock factory and keeping the Irish factory opened.
We want our jobs, and we're prepared to sit here.
For how long?
As long as it takes to get 240 jobs.
We decided to sit in, thinking we'd only be sitting in for a few days and we'd change our mind, but we ended up sitting in for 7 months.
7 months.
Aye.
And how did you manage to put up with all that over the 7 months?
Oh, it was hard. We had to sleep there, and we had to do about 60 hours because we were there around the clock, because the minute we would move out, they would take over the factory. What we're doing was we're keeping the machines and the goods, because they get grants for these machines, and they were going to take them away and take them over to the island, so we decided that we would hold on to all these things.
What kind of reaction did you get from your husbands and that when you phoned them at 4:30 to say you were sitting in?
Shock. I think everybody's relatives was shocked, because it was the first time they'd heard anything like this. And I mean, we didn't even know what were, as I say, we thought it was a couple of days, But it was, everybody was shocked. But at the same time, they were right up there, were right behind you, And so the local people come up, relatives and everything, and they handed in blankets and flasks of tea and something to eat. And we all put money together, and we decided that we'd send out for fish suppers. And we got two of the boys, and they went up, they found a way through the roof and up over the roof, and get fish suppers, and was able to come back in the roof again.
A lot of fish suppers.
I'll paint a special, please, Sean and a half.
They got in touch with us and we decided, okay, we'll do what we can to help them out. And then unfortunately some of the men started slacking off a wee bit, you know. And so what I done myself in particular was I was in Ferguson's yard at the road here.
You were
I was a
convener at
convener
that time?
out there, aye. And what I done then was I said, well, okay, what we'll do is we'll ask the women to come up from Lee's Jeans on a Friday night and meet us coming out the gate sort of thing.
Aye.
And they had their wee buckets with Lee's Jeans on it, what have you, you know, and banners and all that kind of thing. And the men were simply putting money into the buckets. And believe it or not, it turned out to be a good thing. They finished up getting more money that way than they did with a voluntary subscription sort of thing. You know?
Right.
13 weeks now you've been holding this sit-in. How much longer can you go on?
As long as it takes to get our jobs.
I mean, you can imagine the situation if it was a married woman with a couple of kids, you know. Well, her husband or whoever was sitting in the house saying, well, no, what do I do without my wife here to run this house? And therefore it must have at times got to a bad state. But I can imagine myself that some husbands would get a wee bit fed up with it and say, well, wait a wee minute, you know.
Who do you thank for the success of this campaign?
Helen?
Would you all say it's the case?
Aye.
We didn't sit down and just take what was handed to us right at the beginning. I felt that we did something about it.
After the war and into the 60s and early 70s, there was this development of the sort of pin money, you know, when we were going to work to, you know, sort of, for the wee luxury goods, you know, for the motor car or the holiday abroad or whatever it might have been. And I think there is an element of truth in that, certainly. But it wasn't the whole picture either. And certainly now, in today's society in Port Glasgow and Greenock, the women who work here now, I believe wholeheartedly, work because they need to work. The whole thing has come full circle, and they're now working in the same fashion as their mothers and grandmothers did before them. They're now working because they need to work and provide for the family.
There's a lot of people even here just now that'll tell you they were only come in for 6 months and then they were going to leave, but they're still here 20 years on because circumstances have left them that they had to continue to work. You know, between the yard shutting down and a lot of the men worked away. I mean, even the rigs are not as busy as what they were maybe 10, 15 years ago. So really they need to work now. There was pin money then, but I wouldn't say that now.
My husband was made redundant twice from different jobs, but there's an awful lot, I mean, family members who are out of work that have worked in the yards at welding and plating, they're all out of work now and there's no hope for them here. And it means either they stay on unemployment benefit or they leave the town. And that means leaving their families and all their ties.
Port Glasgow and Greenock has, you know, shown a great resilience over the years. It's changed many times and in many ways, and it's changing again now. Whether it changes for the better or the worse, only time will tell, but I certainly think the people in the area will sustain themselves throughout. There's a lot of women who gave a lot of time and a lot of sweat and blood and tears keeping this place together. I've got a lot of relatives and friends and cultural ties here, and I'll always be in Port Glasgow because I like it. I might have to be somewhere else to pursue the academic side of life. I'll always be attached to Port Glasgow.